Imagine standing in a frozen forest, surrounded by gunfire, smoke, and screaming men. You are a soldier, barely in your 20s. In front of you are two prisoners. You are ordered to choose who lives and who dies. There's no right answer, no time to think, and whatever choice you make will haunt you for the rest of your life. This is not a movie scene. This really happened. During World War II, thousands of soldiers were forced into impossible moral choices that no human should ever have to make. Today, we're uncovering the true stories of the soldiers who were forced to decide who would live and who would not. Before we go any further, if you're interested in real World War II stories that go beyond textbooks and show the human side of history, make sure to like this video and subscribe to WorldWarTwoOffical. It really helps the channel grow, and it lets us bring you more untold stories like this one. World War II was not just a war of tanks, planes, and armies. It was a war of decisions. Split-second decisions made by ordinary men under extraordinary pressure. Many soldiers went into battle believing they were fighting for freedom, for their country, or for survival. But few were prepared for the moral weight that war would place on their shoulders. Some were forced to choose between comrades, some between civilians, some between orders and their own conscience. On the Eastern Front, where the fighting between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union was especially brutal, soldiers often faced impossible situations. During retreats, German officers sometimes ordered their men to abandon wounded soldiers to avoid slowing down the unit. In some cases, soldiers were told to shoot severely wounded comrades to prevent them from being captured. These choices were not about courage or cowardice. They were about survival in a war that showed no mercy. One German soldier later recalled standing beside his best friend, who had lost both legs from an artillery strike. The man was conscious, begging not to be left behind. The officer gave a simple order: "We move now." The soldier had seconds to decide. If he tried to carry his friend, both would likely die. If he stayed, he would be shot for disobeying orders. He walked away. His friend was captured and later executed. That soldier survived the war, but he said the sound of his friend's voice followed him for the rest of his life. These kinds of choices were not limited to one side. Allied soldiers faced similar horrors. During the D-Day invasion, medics were overwhelmed. There were more wounded men than they could possibly save. They had to decide who received treatment and who was left behind. These decisions were based on survival chances, not on friendship or rank. A soldier with a minor wound might watch a dying man get the last morphine shot, knowing there was nothing more that could be done. One American medic later said that the hardest part of the war wasn't the gunfire. It was kneeling beside a wounded teenager and deciding he was worth saving because another man had a better chance. That decision, repeated over and over, destroyed something inside him. After the war, he never worked in medicine again. In occupied territories, soldiers were sometimes ordered to make choices involving civilians. In Eastern Europe, villages suspected of helping resistance fighters were punished. Soldiers were ordered to select hostages for execution as a warning. These hostages were often innocent people: farmers, teachers, teenagers. The soldiers tasked with choosing them were usually young men themselves, terrified and trapped between orders and humanity. Some soldiers tried to sabotage these orders quietly. They chose elderly men instead of young ones, believing the old had already lived their lives. Others warned villagers in advance so they could escape, but not everyone could resist. Disobedience often meant death. In one documented case, a soldier was ordered to select 10 men from a village to be executed. He deliberately chose men who were already sick or injured, hoping to spare the healthy. After the executions, the officer in charge discovered what he had done. The soldier was beaten and sent to the front line as punishment, where he was likely killed within weeks. Prisoner of war camps were another place where forced choices became routine. Camp guards sometimes selected prisoners for labor, knowing that those chosen would likely die from exhaustion. Other prisoners begged not to be picked. Some guards tried to look away. Others hardened themselves emotionally, turning people into numbers. Even prisoners themselves were forced into cruel choices. In some camps, senior prisoners were told to select others for work details or punishment. Refuse, and everyone suffered. Comply, and you lived with the guilt. Survivors later said this destroyed trust between prisoners and left scars that never healed. One of the most haunting examples comes from the Holocaust. Jewish prisoners were sometimes forced to assist in selecting people for deportation or labor. These victims were placed in a position no human should ever face. Choosing one person over another did not mean survival. It meant delaying death and carrying unbearable guilt. Back on the battlefield, pilots also faced impossible decisions. Bomber crews sometimes had to decide whether to abort a mission to save a damaged plane or continue and risk everyone on board. Fighter pilots chose whether to chase a fleeing enemy or protect their wingmen. These choices happened in seconds, with lives hanging in the balance. As the war dragged on, fatigue made these decisions even harder. Soldiers were exhausted, traumatized, and numb. Some followed orders automatically. Others broke down. Many carried silent trauma for decades. After the war ended, when soldiers returned home, few people wanted to hear these stories. The world wanted heroes, not moral complexity. Veterans learned to stay quiet. But inside, the questions never stopped. Did I choose right? Could I have done more? Should I have died instead? Psychologists later identified what many of these men suffered from as moral injury. Not fear, not weakness, but deep emotional damage caused by acting against one's own values. This is something that medals and victory parades could never fix. These stories remind us that war is not just about nations and strategies. It's about individuals placed in situations where there are no good options, where survival often comes at the cost of someone else's life, and where the consequences last long after the guns fall silent. If you're finding this story powerful so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to WorldWarTwoOffical. It helps us keep sharing real, human stories from history that are often ignored. Today, when we look back at World War II, it's easy to judge from the safety of the present. But the soldiers who lived through it were not monsters. They were ordinary people forced into extraordinary cruelty by circumstances beyond their control. Understanding this doesn't excuse the horrors of war, but it helps us understand the true cost. Near the end of the war, many soldiers said they no longer fought for ideology. They fought for the man next to them. They fought to survive one more day. And sometimes, survival meant making a choice that would haunt them forever. As the war ended and the world rebuilt, these silent stories faded into the background. But they matter. They remind us why peace matters, why leadership matters, and why sending young people to war should never be taken lightly. If this video made you think, we'd really love to hear your thoughts. Share your opinion in the comments below. Do you think anyone can truly be prepared for these kinds of choices? And if you found this story meaningful, consider sharing it with others. These are stories worth remembering. This has been World War. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.